In this final video, we'll be discussing atypical gender development. Now, I know there are a lot of strong beliefs on this topic, and I am not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't believe. That is really totally up to you. What I am going to attempt here isn't a reflection of my own beliefs on the topic. It's as clear an outline of current psychological theory as I can manage, along with some evidence and evaluation from each side that you can use when writing about the topic yourself. I will be keeping an eye on the comment section of this video. I don't mind if you fancy criticising something that I've said, especially if you've got a thoughtful and reasoned argument, but what I don't want to see is offensive or derogatory comments attacking people who just don't believe what you do. If I see that, I'll just delete the comment thread and block those people from commenting on the rest of the channel. But to be fair, the comment section of my videos are always really positive, and thank you for being an amazing community. But I do want to keep it that way, and I know this particular topic can get contentious. Let's get started. Psychboost.com, over 170 videos to help you with your qualification, and Patreon supporters can access bonus resources, tutorial videos, and the Discord channel. Atypical gender development. When we say atypical gender development, because it's untypical, it's kind of easy to start with what we see as typical gender development. Now, most people would define themselves as cisgender, even if they don't use that term themselves. Cisgender basically means someone's gender identity, their sense of being a man or a woman, matches the sex that was assigned to them from birth. The sex assigned at birth is on the basis of external genitals, or XX or XY chromosome patterns. So the term atypical is simply used to define a group that's in the minority. Atypical gender is any individual whose gender identity doesn't follow the typical male equals masculine, female equals feminine pattern. Now, this obviously will include a wide range of experiences, and the term gender diverse is helpful here. Some more precise examples are transgender. This is when gender identity doesn't match the sex assigned at birth. Non-binary, which means their gender identity isn't male or female, but a blend of the two. Gender fluid, which is when the individual switches between gender identities, and agender, when someone doesn't identify with any gender. Now, when it comes to the A-level specification, it seems that there's much more of a focus on something called gender dysphoria. This is a clinical condition in the DSM-5. Again, it's when there's a mismatch between gender identity and sex assigned at birth, but importantly, there needs to be significant psychological distress associated with this mismatch. So someone with gender dysphoria may say they feel trapped in the wrong body, and this then results in depression. But not all people who would describe themselves as gender diverse experience gender dysphoria. And in the evaluations, I'll make clear why that's an important point to make. But as the specification focuses on the concept of gender dysphoria, everything that I say from this point forward will be linked to that diagnosis. We can divide explanations for atypical gender development and associated gender dysphoria into two categories: biological and socio-psychological. So, is it genetic hormonal processes, or is it due to early life experience? Biological explanations for gender dysphoria. One of the leading biological theories for gender dysphoria is brain sex theory, and this is based on observations of areas of the brain like the hypothalamus in male to female transgender individuals being closer to the size of biological females than biological males. If areas of the brain are the same size, this raises a possibility that this results in a feminization of whatever behaviour that area of the brain is responsible for. If we say that atypical gender development is a genetic process, then what we're saying is a variation in genes leads to a biological process that changes gender expression. So perhaps a gene that leads to the changes we see in the hypothalamus, or levels of hormones the body produces. For example, less testosterone produced leading to more feminine behaviour in males. The mother's hormonal levels might also play a part in gender development. If the growing fetus is exposed to unusual levels of testosterone, for example, this could lead to a change in the gendered behaviour. So, potentially overexposure in female fetuses leading to masculinization, and underexposure of male fetuses leading to feminization. Biological explanations for gender dysphoria. Research evaluations. I have 3 pieces of research evidence, and between them they cover genetics, brain sex theory, and hormones. The first, by Van Bijsterveld, is genetic evidence. This large-scale twin study collected gender identity data from over 8,000 twin pairs in the Netherlands. These twin pairs, of course, were a combination of genetically identical monozygotic twins and dizygotic twins who share half of their genes. Now, despite these genetic differences, other aspects of their lives should be pretty similar, like education, diet, and parenting style. Now, when the large data set was analysed, looking at how likely it was that if one twin was experiencing atypical gender identity, the other twin was, 70% of the variance in gender identity of the twins could be explained by these genetic differences. Put a little more simply, monozygotic twins are more likely to both show atypical or both show typical gender development, and in dizygotic twins it was more likely for one of them to be experiencing atypical gender development but not the other, a difference that seems to be down to their genes. A really interesting additional finding of the study was females with a female co-twin were more likely than females with a male co-twin to show cross-gender behaviour. And if you think about this finding, it's completely the opposite from what you'd expect from social learning theory. Social learning theory would predict that the girls should have used their twin brothers as models for cross-gendered behaviour. So you could use this study as a critical evaluation of social learning theory's explanation of gender development and atypical gender development. Garcia-Falgueras' work is evidence for brain sex theory. 42 subjects had an area of their brain called the INAH in the anterior hypothalamus dissected in post-mortem. Now, the researchers found that the male to female transgender subjects had a closer volume and neuron density in this area to biological female controls than to male biological controls. Now, this suggests that the INHA is associated with gender identity, potentially meaning atypical gender development is a result of a sexual differentiation in the brain. The third study links genetics and hormones. Thielston scanned the complete genome of 13 transgender individuals and compared these with 88 non-transgender controls. This revealed 21 gene variations. These are associated with how the infant brain processes the hormone estrogen before birth. Now, this suggests that early hormonal influences on the developing infant could lead to gender dysphoria later in life. Psychological explanations for gender dysphoria. If we're explaining gender dysphoria with a social psychological explanation, we're suggesting that factors like the influence of family and peers, as well as wider society like culture and media, results in atypical gender development. Now, a behaviourist would say that people's behaviour, including gendered behaviour, are shaped by operant conditioning. So we assume that most children receive direct reinforcement and punishment for gendered behaviour, like praise and shame for playing with certain toys. Now, if a child is rewarded by their parents for cross-gendered behaviour, the argument is that they'll be more likely to repeat cross-gendered behaviour and eventually develop gender dysphoria. Social learning theorists agree with this behaviourist process. But in addition, they suggest children who observe non-gender conforming role models being rewarded will be more likely to show cross-gendered behaviour through vicarious reinforcement. Also, social learning theory would suggest cross-gendered behaviour is more likely if a child has few same-sex models available to them. Cognitive psychologists think gender dysphoria is due to development of schemas. One main cognitive idea is called the dual pathway theory. This suggests that children do develop the typical set of schemas that are sex-typed. This is the attitudinal pathway. But children who go on to experience gender dysphoria develop a second set of non-sex type schemas from personal experiences. These non-sex type schemas is called the personal pathway. Now, if this second set of personal schemas override the attitudinal pathway, then the child becomes androgynous, or potentially gender dysphoric. Research evaluations. Now, there isn't a huge amount of high-quality research into psychological explanations for gender dysphoria, but there are some results that we can use. Firstly, we can point to data that shows early childhood gender dysphoria tends to be temporary in most cases. Drummond showed that only 12% of a group of 25 young girls still had gender dysphoria when followed up around 10 years later. Wallen produced similar results showing only 27% of a group of 55 young girls and boys still experienced gender dysphoria after 10 years. Now, while these results are not direct evidence of psychological effects on gender, they do suggest in early childhood gender identity isn't fixed, as we would expect if we took a purely biological approach. Social psychological factors like social learning theory are much more able to explain these shifts in gender identity, children adjusting their gender identity and behaviour on the basis of their experiences. Zucker conducted interviews with mothers of 115 male to female children. This interview assessed the level of separation anxiety the child had with their mother. Now, Zucker found that the children who met the full criteria for gender identity disorder, which is the old diagnosis before gender dysphoria, were significantly more likely to have also had separation anxiety disorder. Now, this suggests that there might be a link to how the mothers have interacted with their children and the children developing gender dysphoria. General evaluations, gender dysphoria. Now, I think because it's such a sensitive topic, it would be appropriate to reflect on the impact this research can have on the people who are being researched. So, social sensitivity. So my first point is some people with atypical gender development, but not all, think that their gender identity is due to purely biological processes. Now this fits better with a personal belief that their gender identity is unchangeable. Researchers looking for evidence that supports psychological explanations for gender dysphoria should be aware of how they report their findings. A misunderstanding by wider society could lead to stigma, interpreting results as atypical gender identity being a choice or even something that should be treated. Perhaps a step in the right direction was psychologists who helped to create the DSM-5 replaced the old term gender identity disorder with gender dysphoria. Now, the important distinction is the old term defined anyone with atypical gender identity as someone diagnosable with a mental health condition. While with gender dysphoria, the individual needs to show psychological distress. And I think this is an example of how the scientific community has attempted to be socially sensitive towards the group they're studying. One final point. We've looked at biological and psychological explanations. Now, of course, we could suggest that these processes work in combination. It's likely reductionist to suggest that atypical gender identity is fully biologically determined. But perhaps hormonal and genetic factors do produce the conditions in some people where they're predisposed to develop an atypical gender identity during childhood. But this identity persists into adulthood depending on the social psychological experiences they have as they age. So an interactionist approach for gender development. Here is a real gender exam question from 2017 on atypical gender development. Give it a go and see how you do. I want to give a thank you to everybody who supported this channel over on Patreon during the development of the gender unit. You helped make these A-level videos possible. And a quick reminder, if you're a PsychBoost patron at the neuron level and above, you can access 6 bonus gender tutorial videos over on psychboost.com. In them, I'll talk you through a model answer for the exam questions, and I'll give you some general exam tips based on the examiner reports. For everybody else, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the videos released right up to your exams, and I'll see you in the next PsychBoost video.